Introductory note. What you're about to read actually happened while on an internship during fall of 2014. In order to protect people's privacy, I'm not going to include the names of my friends, the names of the company I was employed with at the time, or the name of my university. But after you read my account and you feel skeptical or otherwise have any questions about my experience, feel free to email me at 2453396381 at qq.com. I know the address looks like a spam email, but QQ is actually an extremely popular social networking site in mainland Japan, as Facebook, Twitter, and pretty much all Western networks are blocked by the Chinese government. The reason for the suspicious username is that your QQ number is randomly generated and assigned to you when you create an account. That's right, your identity is literally reduced to itemized numbers until you provide personal details on your account. In the fall of 2014, I got a job to supervise over 13 volunteer English teachers. I would be working in a Chinese city called Weihai, located in the Shandong province. The company that hired me sends English teachers to Mexico, India, and China, Russia, and the Ukraine each semester. I was super excited at the opportunity because not only would I have a chance to live in China again, I'd originally been one of the volunteers for the same program a few years prior. But my university was willing to grant me a semester's worth of Chinese language credits as an academic internship. I could get job experience, live abroad in a country that I consider my second home, and complete a semester of school. It was my dream semester. In Weihai, the volunteers and I lived and worked at a prestigious international private school. They treated us really well, and one of the biggest perks being that, in addition to taking the same vacation days as the school's faculty that takes place over China's national holidays, we also got an extra week or two of personal vacation time. It was during one of these vacations that I had one of the most disturbing experiences in my life. Two of my friends from the group, I'll call them Sarah and David, decided they wanted to travel down south to China's Guangdong province during the Dragon Boat Festival. I suggested that we visit Yangshuo, a little known village surrounded on all sides by region's gorgeous mountains. I visited it a year before and wasn't about to pass up on an opportunity to visit there again. Search Google Images for Yangshuo scenery, and you'll understand why I'm so crazy about this place. Yangshuo isn't a large town, but even so, if you plan to do everything that you want to do while you're there, you'll need transportation since most of the things to do are out in the countryside. The problem was that we'd chosen a super busy time of year to visit such a popular tourist location. All the traffic in the area, the entire 6 days we were there, was literally continuous traffic jams. So taking a cab or hiring a rickshaw wasn't an option. We were fine though, as we rented some bikes, which gave us the freedom to go anywhere we wanted, and it actually worked out even better than relying on cabs because we would be able to get to some places that were out of the way and inaccessible by car. I remembered some mud caves pretty deep in the countryside that I visited before. It was about an hour outside of town by bike, so it was more than a little out of the way, but its secluded nature was one of the reasons it was such an appealing destination, especially during the busy holiday where it was nice to have a break from all the tourists. I convinced Sarah and David to make these trips to the mud caves, explaining how we'd already done everything there is to do immediately around the city. They reluctantly agreed, and the morning of the fifth day we grabbed our bikes and headed out. We rode for an hour and a half, 2 hours. After the 2 hour mark, I realized that I must have gotten us lost. Granted, it had been quite a while since I'd last been there, so I think it's understandable that I didn't remember the route. Regardless, I felt stupid and guilty because I talked up the mud cave so much to my friends, and it looked like we weren't even going to make it to them. Not only that, we seemed to be in a completely isolated section of the countryside. I spoke the language, so finding our way back to town wasn't going to be a problem, provided we found another person. From what it looked like, we were in the middle of the wilderness, and I was worried that I inadvertently wasted one of the last days of our vacation. I explained the situation to my friends, who groaned and were noticeably annoyed at me, but who, to their credit, didn't complain or even blame me for ruining their vacation. That actually made me feel even worse about my screw up. This was a once in a lifetime experience, and I knew that losing a vacation day was no small matter to them. We stopped our bikes and began to discuss what we should do. Should we continue following the current trail and maybe find someone further along the way? Should we try to backtrack, run into someone closer to the main road? Should we just abandon our original plan and find something else to do out in the country? While we were deciding on what course of action we should take, I noticed some old looking buildings, hidden within a valley, obscured by the thick vegetation and clinging to a steep mountain slope. I was elated. There was bound to be some people in or around those buildings, and it couldn't have been more than a 15-minute ride from where we currently were. Aside from which, some of the most memorable places in China are the ones that you just stumble upon by accident, the ones that aren't known by big touristy places. Our bad luck could turn out to be something good after all. It was evident as we rode our bikes into the enclave that it had been abandoned for some time. The buildings were obviously once part of an old commune from the Maoist era, when communism was in full swing and everyone was required to live in the communal compounds. After Mao's death and Deng Xiaoping started on the economic reform to move China away from communism, people deserted communes like this to make their life in the city and chase the capitalistic dream. So what we'd stumbled upon was actually a really cool piece of Chinese history. We decided to check it out, look around, take some pictures, etc., etc. The entire compound was an enormous Sihuhuan, which is essentially a house contained in the walls surrounding a large courtyard that usually contains smaller structures. Again, you could Google it for a better idea of what it looks like. In this case, though, it wasn't just a single household, it was an entire walled community. The walls themselves comprised of living quarters. The central area contained an overgrown field where they would have kept publicly owned livestock. It looked like some of the animals had taken up residence since the people left. Some goats and cows grazed the long grass, and chickens clucked around their feet. Scattered around the perimeter of the field were a few run-down buildings dotting the compound, which I assumed at one point were the dining hall and some small textile mills or a small-time industrial production plant, depending on what this place was specialized in. We checked around the living area, and it was immediately clear that this place had been abandoned for several decades. The rooms were almost completely vacant, only furniture and a few odd assortments of possessions. Woks, chopsticks, portraits of Mao, were all left behind, creating some sort of gloomy atmosphere amid the cracked and crumbling walls. We snapped some pictures and recorded some videos and just generally took in the scenery. We were getting ready to leave when I heard a voice from the far end of the commune. Was someone still living here? It was possible. We had seen some animals left in the central area after all. I'd assumed they were just wild, but it made sense that somebody was still raising them. In fact, it probably made more sense, because it didn't seem very likely these stray animals would find their way inside a gated community like this. We approached the apartment where the voice was coming from. The front door was slightly ajar, and the rich smell of incense was wafting out. The voice continued droning on, almost like a chant. David spoke up. "You think this guy knows the way back to Yangshuo? You should ask for directions." I thought maybe the person inside was performing some sort of religious ceremony, so I was reluctant to interrupt him, and I said as much. "We don't know how long they're going to take in there. Do you seriously want to wait outside their door for a couple of hours like a bunch of creepers? Just knock on the door, and if what they think they're doing is really important, then they'll just ask us to wait and give us directions when they're done." I was a little bit annoyed by that because David had a tendency to use our celebrity status as white people to expect special treatment from the Chinese nationals. I preferred to try to blend in with the culture as much as I could, and I had a strong respect for the local customs, particularly the religious ones. But he had a point. Chinese people are naturally hospitable and eager to help others. If this person was a devoted Buddhist or Taoist, then their willingness to help us would be even greater and would most likely drop whatever they were doing the second they saw us. So I knocked lightly on the door. There was no response. I knocked a bit louder, and the person continued mumbling to themselves. I opened the door and slightly called out to them to alert them of our presence. Wei? Ni hao. The chanting stopped for a moment, almost imperceptibly, but then continued as though nothing happened. I pushed the door open all the way and saw an elderly, hunchbacked man wandering around the room, shaking a wooden tool that he hobbled about, mumbling his incantations. He was certainly a communist-era comrade. His hunched posture and wrinkled yet callous skin told of years of hard work. He was practically doubled over at the waist, and only had a few wispy white hairs on the top of his head. His clothes were the classical communist fare, dark gray pants with a matching button-up shirt that reached to his Adam's apple, along a squared-off cap. He must have taken great care of his clothing because they were in surprisingly good shape considering they were from around the 1950s. It's not like anyone could find a replacement for the era-specific clothing 60 years after the fact. Even more surprising than his physical appearance, however, was the state of his apartment. Given how empty the rest of the rooms were in the commune, I was shocked at how decorated this one was. It looked as though he'd scavenged everything his neighbors had left behind when they left. None of the walls were accessible because the tables had been pushed up against them, occupying every inch of the room's perimeter. The tabletops were completely covered by candles, statues of miniature Buddhas in various positions, flowers, beaded bracelets and necklaces, shoes of infants, calligraphy drawn carefully on rice paper, and what had looked like personal effects of loved ones who had either passed away or abandoned him. There looked like thousands of other items that I couldn't even begin to identify. I approached him and began to speak, asking him if he was familiar with Yangshuo and if he would be able to help us find our way back to the main road. In response, he only muttered a short phrase. Wo shou shigoron. Wo shou shigoron? I'm short for people. Was this person expecting company? Excuse me? I asked in Mandarin. Wo shou shigoron. He repeated again, urgently. He glanced at me, and his eyes darted to Sarah and David. He looked between the three of us, repeating this phrase over and over. I felt bad. This poor man must have been senile. His friends or family had left the commune and promised to come back, and he was still waiting for their return. Or maybe he was just so far gone and honestly believed he was preparing to receive 4 guests who hadn't arrived yet. I tried communicating with him a few more times, but he simply continued mumbling the cryptic phrase and shaking a wooden object in his hand. I took a closer look and realized I had seen that object he was holding before. It was a religious instrument used for venerating statues of Buddha. Similar to how Catholics believe that partaking of the Eucharist purifies members of their sins. Buddhists would use tools like the one this man was shaking to sprinkle statues of Buddha with water. They were shaped like Spanish maracas and were riddled with tiny holes that would allow several drops of water to escape each hole with each shake. Sometimes people would infuse the water with lavender or other herbs to invoke a pleasant smell. I don't know what this man had mixed with that water, but it smelled pretty putrid. I ignored it and turned back to Sarah and David. What's he saying? Sarah asked. He just kept saying I'm missing 4 people, I replied. What does that mean? Honestly, I have no clue, but I have a feeling he's not going to be able to help us. We should try to head back to the main road and hopefully run into someone who can give us direction. Ah, what the hell? David yelled. Sarah and I spun around to look at him. That old guy just soaked me, he complained, motioning to the wet spot on his shirt. I rolled my eyes. Give him a break, I said. He obviously doesn't know what he's doing. As I said this, the elderly man continued to shuffle around the room, sprinkling water on the statues of Buddha and the other artifacts laid out on the table, all while muttering that phrase, Wo Sho Shigarun, Wo Sho Shigarun.
I'm fine with just going, but you should at least ask him if he has any water. My bottle's completely empty,
Sarah said. It was a good idea to get refills before we left. Yangshuo is ridiculously hot and humid year-round, so even though it was late October, it felt like mid-July in Florida. We were so sweaty that we could easily get dehydrated just by standing around, even if without riding bikes. Yeah, that's a good idea, I responded. I was about to turn to the man for one last attempt at communication to hopefully find out where we can get some water. He violently shook the Macarena-like tool, drizzling water on my shoes and the floor around my feet. Some even splashed up my pant legs and shorts. Whoa, Sho Shigarun, he muttered again, but this time it caused a chill to run through me. Something didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was wrong. Whoa, Shao Shigarun. I took a step towards the man and felt my foot slide slightly as it touched the floor. I looked down and saw an unnatural layer of gray dust that had collected on the floor. How could there be so much dust on the floor if someone lived here? Wo Shao Shigarun. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable and I felt the urge to leave, but I couldn't understand why. I glanced over to Sarah, about to speak, when I realized something that I haven't realized before. Maybe I missed it due to all the clutter, but this room was in noticeably worse condition than the others. The walls had black stains on them. The wood in the window frame was blackened and seemingly shattered, far more brittle than the other apartments. It almost seemed like this specific apartment survived a series of accidents, but was still somehow standing. So why was this the only room left occupied? Wo Shao Shigarun. The broken man shuffled past me once again, and this time I got a quick spray in the face. The powerful odor assaulted my nostrils. The smell of the scented water was off. It was too potent, too abrasive, and almost had a toxic fragrance to it. It made me want to cough, to get it out of my nose and throat. Wo Shao Shigarun. An icy shiver ran through me as I made a sudden realization. Guys, we need to go now, I said. I didn't wait for Sarah or David to respond. I made it for the door. I ran until I reached my bike. Hey, what's going on? David called out as midway through the courtyard.
Why'd you ditch us?
Sarah asked. They both caught up to me and were mounting their bikes, slightly out of breath. I didn't answer them. We rode the trail we entered through in silence. After only about half an hour of riding, we stumbled upon some hikers, both Swedish. They spoke impeccable English, which was good because I wasn't in the mood for talking, and Sarah was eager to take over so we could find our way back to the hostel. It wasn't until later that evening, when we were back at the hostel, that Sarah insisted that I told them what had freaked me out so much.
What's going on? Ever since we left that creepy old guy's house, you've been acting really weird.
I didn't want to tell him because I was hoping that if I kept it to myself, then maybe I'll realize that it would be less real. Maybe if I didn't say it out loud, then I could believe that it hadn't really happened, but it had. Remaining silent about it wouldn't change that. I sighed. You know what that guy kept repeating? Yeah, you told us it meant I'm short 4 people. That can't be what's bothering you, though. That's not what he was saying. I heard it wrong, I replied. You see, the thing about Chinese is that tones make all the difference. For example, if you hear g, g, it could either mean older brother or each and every, depending on what tones you use. What I thought was I'm missing 4 people, it wasn't that at all. It wasn't until I understood what he was actually spraying me with that I realized I'd been hearing the tones completely wrong. He wasn't spraying water all over his apartment. He was sprinkling kerosene. And he wasn't saying, I'm missing 4 people. What he really was saying was, I burned everyone.
Hey everybody, NightShifter here. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. If you have any questions, concerns, complaints, words of advice, don't forget to put it down in the comment section. And last but not least, thank you for watching.